Greetings, fellow quitters, and welcome to the CMDQ podcast. We're your hosts. I'm John Pelfrey.
And I'm Maari Casey.
This month, we're diving into money, how we think about it, how it makes us feel, and the role it plays in our lives. Today, we're thinking more about the earliest messages we got about money, both the good and the bad, and how they might impact the way we talk about money with the next generation. Pretty much everyone has the same amount of money trauma. Whether you're a parent, a grandparent, a mentor, whatever, you don't have to pass it down. Let's offload our unhelpful money beliefs and break some generational curses, but no pressure. All right. So, Maari, when you were a child, did you have an idea whether your family was rich, poor, middle class, any of that stuff? Like, did you have sort of in the stratosphere of where you live? Did you have a clue?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in West Virginia, so it's, kind of a different vibe there from a lot of places. It was not necessarily, I mean, it wasn't like country, but it was not like urban, like a bigger city. I definitely think I knew that I kind of fell somewhere in the middle. I went to school with a lot of kids. It was public school in West Virginia, so a lot of kids that I knew were very, very poor. And then I went to school with a lot of kids who, as far as like where I grew up standards, like had all the toys and had the things and had passes to go to the pool and all that kind of stuff. So I knew I kind of lived in the middle.
Wow, fancy passes to the pool. Cool. Yeah. I was the same way. I'm the son of a Baptist minister and very middle class, sort of growing up lifestyle. I was definitely aware of the haves and the have-nots because part of being involved in the church in the South is you see that stuff really clearly. I knew I was not a have-not, and I knew I was not a big time have. I was sat sort of right in the middle. There were definitely times when, money was tight, and then there were times when it wasn't, and that is just, I guess, what it means to be middle class in America. Sometimes you struggle, sometimes you're kind of okay, but you just feel like you're just sort of treading water. I think that was always the sense in my family. It was just like, we're just treading water. We're just we're getting through the month, and then we're getting through the next month, and we're getting through the next month. It was never really getting ahead, but it never really felt like falling behind either. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it felt like, it always felt like we had what we needed. Maybe not what we wanted, which is probably the case and probably a good lesson. But we didn't go hungry. We had Christmas presents. We had birthday presents. We would go out to eat on occasion, but not nearly as much as, I think we do and modern people do now. I think a large part of that, I think a lot of the influence from our family came from how what my dad's perception of money was. And, he was forever up until he passed away, was almost frugal to the point of almost being cheap and not allowing himself to enjoy money. So very focused on saving. And I think it's because he grew up very poor. And so that became his mentality of save, don't spend, they never had a credit card. I don't think they had a credit card until they got to be till we were out of college. Never had a credit card, don't buy anything on credit, everything's paid for in cash. And that is one lesson that I'm really grateful for, never buy a car full price, all those things that he never told me directly, but were just kind of there. So everything we bought was paid for in cash, usually not brand new, and then was fixed if it broke, going back to our previous podcast. So the same lawnmower he had probably for 15 years, the same car he had, for 20 years at least, the same yellow Toyota pickup truck. And so I think a lot of that was definitely something that was passed down to me. And I'm grateful for, especially for the credit card thing, because I think that gets a lot of young people in big trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Credit cards are a whole dangerous trap. Once you get into that world, it's hard to dig back out of it. I definitely learned some really good lessons. The automobile thing is an interesting one. In my family, we never, ever had a new car. A new car was seen as why would you want to do that? Why would you want to pay depreciation on something that's brand new? My dad always told me, he's like, the minute you drive it off the lot, it's worth 30% less than what you paid. And so why would I want to pay for that 30%, luxury tax, essentially, on something? I can get something that's 5 years old, that has, right around 100,000 miles on it, and I can drive it for the next 10, 15 years and save myself a lot of that cash. And, that was a good lesson. So my first car was a 1983 Chevy Cavalier. It was a tin box of danger, basically. No safety systems, no nothing. It got me where I needed to go from point A to point B. And he paid $1,600 for that car. And even in today's math, that's probably equivalent to like under $5,000 or right around that. It was not a ton of money, which, in my mind was smart. Like I was a young kid driving around in a small town. I don't need anything that's like super reliable, because if a car breaks down, I'm 10 miles from home or whatever. I'm not driving 10 hours away. But yeah, it was never like, we never had luxury things, but we had what we needed. Do you remember any Christmas or any time that you got a present that you weren't expecting because you thought like, oh, well, that's like, my parents would never buy that for me because that's too much money or whatever, but they still like pulled it out somehow?
Yeah, they probably put it on what was it called?
Layaway?
Yeah, like layaway,
Yeah.
like on rewards, they'd go and So that concept I think is probably gone for the most part. But yeah, we got our Nintendo, like the first Nintendo that came out, and that was like whoa, and that's like over $100 right there. Like that's a lot, and that's when I think we became much more aware of. I was at the age where I was like, wow, those are expensive items. And I think we also got we got a tape, like a recorder, like a video recorder in the same year. And I was like, wow, my dad must have gotten like a bonus or something.
Yeah.
So like the Nintendo was one where I was like, whoa, like we're next level now. It's a big deal.
I asked that question and my story was going to be the Nintendo too.
Nintendo.
Yeah. My brother and I were going to put our money together from Christmas and birthday and get it. And so we put it on layaway, or we thought we did, but the exact same thing. And we were going to pay $10 a month or whatever, or a week or whatever it was. And that was my parents' way of like teaching us about credit and paying things off. Because layaway was like, you weren't charged interest. You were essentially prepaying for the thing and then you'd get it.
Right.
But so that was like a way for us to understand that. And we got like 2 payments in, and then Christmas rolled around and it showed up. And yeah, we were very, very happy. I think the Nintendo in the 1980s was the kid gift of all kid gifts. Like it was like, that was the magical Christmas. The original NES. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's cool. I remember my parents doing it for that. The first guitar that I got was not, guitars are not cheap in general. It wasn't the most expensive, most amazing guitar in the world, but it was the first thing that I learned on. And I know that my parents saved for that for me. That was still a really meaningful gift. I gave that same guitar to my son. I played the guitar until the frets wore down to nothing. So yeah. All right. So let's see. What do you think the role of like our parents' belief systems, religion, politics, whatever, do you think any of that played into this money question too? Because we grew up in pretty similar backgrounds when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah. I definitely think religion played a huge part in a lot of things of how I perceived the adult world when I entered it, good and bad. And I think for me, the thing was money, especially as it relates to religion, and money was never talked about in our house. It wasn't like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're saving for. The idea that somehow kind of manifested itself out of just church on Sunday, church on Wednesday, was that you have money, if you're wealthy, you're a bad person. It's like, you shouldn't have money, like you should give it away to the poor. And it's like, whatever, the meek shall inherit the earth. So if you're poor, then it's like pure, so the idea that people had money, to me, I was like, they have money, they must be greedy, they must be bad, they must be doing something unscrupulous. Like that all kind of played into how I came out of my young childhood and into adulthood. And it's like, wow, that's crappy to take with you, especially if you're building a business, trying to negotiate salaries, because then you negotiate from a place of like, well, I don't want to ask for that because that makes me a bad person. And I think that's something that I still struggle to overcome, is like, no, having wealth doesn't mean you're a bad person. That means like you have opportunities to use that for good things and for cool things. I tell the kids, I'm like, there's people who don't have a lot of money who are complete jerks. And there's people who do have a lot of money who are complete jerks. I was like, it's equal opportunity. But I think that's a big one for me that I still struggle to get past.
Yeah. I'm going to butcher the verse exactly, but it's easier for a rich man to go through the eye of a needle, right, than to get to heaven. So, yeah, I think there was a part of that sort of but for us, it was more about the discipline of giving and about taking care of the less fortunate. One of the great things about a religious organization or a nonprofit that you believe in the cause, if you're giving that money and you're seeing the result of it in your community, whether that's a food bank or, helping people to pay their electricity bills or anything like that, where you see, okay, I'm giving 10% of my money and then it's coming back into the community and I can like see the direct result of it. And I can actually go volunteer to give away that food or to do whatever, that it makes it very concrete, this idea of like helping people out and making the world a better place. I think that's something that sometimes we miss in today's world and in today's society. We don't see the fruits of that stuff, and it makes it feel less tangible. And I remember like my mom started a sort of a ministry called Love and Deed that was this exact thing. It was this idea that the church would give a certain portion of what it took in as a whole and use that for community outreach, and used it to help pay people's electricity bills if they needed it, or to buy food, or to help them with rent, or to help them get clothes, or to help them learn interview skills for jobs, or whatever the thing was. And that had a big impact on me, because it taught me that it's not just up to the government. It's not just up to individuals. It's not just like the role of those types of organizations is to help the needy. And so that really informed my perception of money too, in a different way. It helped me to understand that money wasn't just there for me to go buy. What is it that you said? Your son said jet skis and gold chains, right? Like not just there for jet skis and gold chains. It's there. It's there to help people. And everybody plays that like, what if I won the lottery game? When my wife and I talk about that, the first thing we say is like, well, we would take a chunk of it and we would find ways to, make our community better, make the people around us better, and do it in a secret way so that nobody knows that it's us, like that. Like that's kind of our ultimate dream, is to be able to set up things to help people. So I think for me, it's less like we're talking about money trauma here, but it's almost less about the trauma of it. And it's more about like, how did money in our childhood inform our perspective today? And so for me, that had a huge impact on the way that I worked and what the purpose of money was.
Yeah, I do feel like I thinking about how things get passed down from generation to generation, and thinking about my dad growing up in a tough spot, where he was poor and he had multiple siblings, and kind of that, like, there's not enough, and I have to save and I have to go without so that like my sister can be fed and that kind of stuff. I can see how that came into his mentality as an adult. Now we were never deprived of things like, the normal stuff, but like he never let himself have nice things, really. And I think that's always something, like, we talk about this now, and part of what we're talking about now is how to break those curses kind of moving forward in our kids. And it's like when my daughter will say like, oh, I want to get this like Lululemon, whatever thing. And she's like, I know we can't afford it. And I'm like, I try to shut that phrase down, because that's like such a common phrase. And everyone's like brings it to the hair, like, we can't afford it. And it's like, no, you can, but everything is a decision, right? So we say like, you can afford it, but you can't afford this and that and that. So it's like, we do this. I think I mentioned this on another podcast, where once every year we do one of our Christmas gifts is $100, and we get to go shopping with, like, it's a mother-daughter day. And so she has $100 bill, and the idea that she has to break it is really hard for her to like think through, what do I really want? What is like, I can get a bunch of small things, or I can get like one thing. And so just that lesson alone, I think, is helping her understand that it's not so much that we can't afford this. It's just that I can't afford everything, and getting everything is not good. Because she's also seen it where she has got a bunch of stuff, and all of us have, where it's like a bunch of cheap things and we have quantity, but we don't have the quality of it. And so it's like those kind of lessons, I think, help people understand that money is not tied to, money is not like this sentence. It's a tool that we can use, and, and trying to get that emotion part of it and make it more like pragmatic. Like, let's think about it. Like, can we afford that? Do we really need it? Is there another way to get that? Are we willing to sacrifice a trip or a thing, whatever, because we're going to spend the money that we have on this thing? So I'm trying to get our kids to like think through how they're using money and then how they're seeing it, because I do feel like some of those phrases, we can't afford it, you don't need it, it's not worth it, whatever it is, it can really kind of embed in our brain and cause these negative reactions going forward with how we view money, how we view people who spend a lot of stuff and that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to try to pull that back from your kids, because of course my natural inclination is like, we don't need it. You don't need it. Like, we don't have to get it. So it's hard to stop those curses, I think, from moving forward.
Yeah, I think it is too. If I think about how my grandparents grew up, I have one set of grandparents that are from East Tennessee, Appalachia. My grandmother always, her whole life, had a garden. When I think of her, I think of the garden. And because that's where she was. She was always growing food for her family. And so, you don't have a lot of money, you're in Appalachia. The answer is I have to learn a skill in order to feed my family. And my expenses are buying seeds, figuring out a way to water it. And then it's time and energy and labor and effort to be out there growing the food for your family. One of the things that taught me is that there are other ways to skin the cat. In our modern world, a lot of us go like, well, I get my food from the grocery store. It magically appears from a truck on the shelves. And the only way that I can eat is either to eat out or to buy food from the grocery store. And I know in the back of my mind, it's like, well, there's another way to deal with that. If I need to, I can grow my own food. And I think that one of the things that I learned from my grandparents, from my parents, whether it's like DIY work on my house or fixing my own car or whatever, is this mentality that like, sometimes I can make that trade-off of my time to pay for something that might be very expensive, like food or whatever. I can do that so that I can have the thing that I want. I can take care of my needs in many different ways. I could grow my own food, or I can do my own work on the car, or I can do my own this or that. And it did create this sort of like DIY mentality in me that said that like, I don't have to depend on cash as the only way to get things done in the world. And then that's what kind of turned my like entrepreneurial brain on. Because when you start looking at it like that, it's like, oh, well, yeah, my grandparents grew up poor. That means my parents, or my mother grew up in a house with 5 kids and they never had a whole lot of money or whatever. But there's so many other ways to solve these problems. And sometimes you can take a trauma, you can take something like quote unquote bad, which is, having to grow your own food because it's the only way you can feed your family. And you can turn that into, yeah, but it turned your grandkids into people who think about solving problems in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's like, we were talking about this with our kids this week as they're going through like some hard middle school stuff, which middle school is the worst. So I'm like, it's fine. You just get through it. But like, I think a lot of those things that you go through that are difficult or traumatizing are hard because they're hard. And but on the other side of that, you're going to be building up those strengths. So I think people who go through things with money, which can be very demoralizing and very difficult, and then they hopefully usually can come on the side and be smarter about it next time, or like build those skills up. I think my dad saw what he went through with money and then made sure to secure his family with a home that was paid for, cars that were paid in cash, because he didn't want us to have to go through the experience of, instability financially. And so I do feel like those traumas that we get with money, and sometimes they're big and sometimes they're small, and sometimes they're for a long time, sometimes they're for a short period of time. It could be a layoff or something like that. It's like, it's giving you those skills and those understanding of like, this is something I learned, it's a lesson I learned. And then going forward, I'm not going to make these mistakes again, but I'm going to grow from them. So there is I think you're right that there's some aspects of that hard stuff that you go through that end up being really valuable and positive on the back end of it.
Yeah. As long as you look at it that way and you look like, what can I learn from this? So what are some things, like you and I have talked about this conversation offline outside of the podcast a lot. What are some of the things that you try to instill or teach to your kids about money? Maybe things that you learned as an adult that were different than the perspective that you had as a kid, but just like those 2 or 3 sort of, key things that you want them to know and understand before they're out of your house and on their own.
Yeah, I think a couple things. One is that money is not good or bad. That it's a tool. It's not tied to your emotion. It's not tied to your value. It's not tied to your self-worth. It is a tool, and to try to separate that, which is hard because money can be very emotional for a lot of other reasons. And that also goes to people. People are not good or bad because they have money or because they don't. So that both of those 2 things I think are really important for my kids to understand, because it's like, you can really pass a lot of judgment on people. It's like, oh, you see this person, driving around in like a Porsche and they got all the bells and whistles. And of course I immediately go to like, I'm sure that person's a jerk. Like they gotta be like, who knows, if I kick their dog, like, or if they steal a little bit out of the like penny jar at the cashier. You just start thinking about it like that. And I just inherently go to that. And I have to stop myself and be like, that can be just a great, awesome person who's successful.
Yeah.
And one of their money dials, to pull from some more people I follow, is that they really value cars. Like, I value cars, meaning I want it to get me from A to B and like all that kind of stuff. But like, I wouldn't, if we won $1 million, Mark's always like, what would you do first? And I was like, he's like, I would buy a fill in the blank car that all boys know, Porsche, Lamborghini, whatever. And he's like, what kind of car would you get? And I was like, I'm great with my Honda Pilot. Like, I love it. It's reliable. It's comfortable. He's just like, this is not a fun game.
Don't you want to go fast?
But I inherently see those. I see people who have those things, and I'm just like, oh, that's a bad person. And that's because I have that. That's coming from my background. So I'm trying to break that with my kids. And then also, we have a mutual friend, Ellen, and I were talking to her because she went through 2008 right out of college. So she experienced that post-college. There's no jobs. I just graduated. I remember her asking one time, like, when you think about money, what do you think? What do you think of? Like, what's the word that comes up? And I said, like, bad. Like, it's bad. Money's bad. Mm-hmm. And I said, what do you think? And I've gotten better now, hopefully. But I was like, what do you think? And she said, freedom. And I thought that was so awesome because they live that life now, where it gives them this flexibility. And I mean, that's kind of the life that we all live too now, and especially in this freelance space where I want my kids to understand that money can provide a lot of things. One of the things that really can provide is freedom, the freedom to give to a lot of great organizations and to affect big changes, the freedom to travel, the freedom to like do those things. And that's such a different way of approaching money versus like money bad or money good. Like that's so narrow. So those things are some concepts I want to pass along.
Yeah. I think for me, the idea of saving early, one of my big regrets, the thing that I didn't understand enough when I was young, was how important it was to get that first chunk of money in the bank and never, ever touch it again. Get it into a mutual fund or whatever it is that people want to put their money into, and just let it sit and ride. I thought I was smarter than that and invested in a small business, and it made it tough for me, sort of going after that. If I had taken that money and just stuck it in some random mutual fund and whatever, I'd be far better off right now. And so that's one of the things that I've really tried to instill in my son is like, get that chunk, whatever it is, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, and just put it away and pretend like it doesn't exist. You're never touching it. And then when you're 65 years old, you'll go back and be like, oh, dang, cool.
Yeah.
That's one for me. The power of compounding interest is real. And we should all get that concept. The other one for me is just, it's kind of like what you said. It's like, it's understanding that the use of money, these are choices that you're making. And it's not that you can't do something. It's that you're making one choice over another. You're choosing to buy this thing over that thing, or to spend money in one way versus another. And so if that's a choice of, buying a Porsche 911 for $250,000, or maybe having a much cheaper car and a nicer house, if you even have that as an option, then, those are choices on like a luxury scale. But the same thing is true every day with your daily habits and spending when it comes to like, Amazon Prime Day was just yesterday or whatever. And it's like, it's so tempting.
Yeah, I missed it. Oh no.
Yeah, but it's so tempting to go in there and be like, I really would like a new coffee pot, right? Like just random or something, whatever. And it's like, ooh, there's one on sale. It's half off. It's
what a good deal.
It's such a good deal because it's half off. I should go buy a new coffee pot. And then you're like, well, but I have a coffee pot and it makes coffee. Like, what do I need a new one for?
Yeah.
And just realizing that that's a choice that you can make right there in that moment to save yourself like $75. It's that delayed gratification piece versus the instant gratification piece. And I think it is so easy to get sucked into instant gratification in today's world. Like, I mean, I can literally order something online and it shows up at my door within hours now, not even days, but hours. And that blows my mind. Like even now, it just like, it's unbelievable to me to think that sometimes it's even cheaper if I do that than it is if I get up, get in my car, go to a store, go buy it and come home. And it breaks my brain sometimes, but that is also a danger thing too. Cause man, I get those emails and we're in the marketing world and somebody sends an email that's like 50% off, whatever. And I look at it and I'm like, nope.
That's a good deal.
Put it away. Or sometimes I do go like, oh, right. That's something I've been wanting or something I've been needing. And it's a good deal. So now's the time to buy it.
I want to add on top what you were talking about first too, where it's like the idea of compounding interest and savings. And I mean, luckily, like the younger generation, probably still not as effectively as they should be, but financial literacy, like those courses and classes are being a lot more, they're in schools more, which is great. And I think that's one piece that, if I can add another one to my kids, is that I want them to understand I want them to grow up understanding how money works and the basic understanding of like investing, and our kids are younger, we've given them a few of those concepts, but it was never talked about. It was really just like you go to a lawyer when you have legal stuff, you go to a financial advisor when you have financial stuff, and you just trust that they are going to not mess up your life. And to think about that now, the kind of power that we give over to people that we barely know, especially with our financial future, and hope that it works out. I mean, some people get really in trouble and it's sad when those things happen, but I am not a math science person. I'm much more art English person, but I found it so empowering to get a better idea of understanding how money works and how it can work for me. And then the risks of it involved. And now that I have that, I mean, as a business owner, I probably wouldn't have had it if I would have stayed in full time. You do kind of like let go and be like autopilot. So I think that is also one thing that I want my kids to understand, is that to understand money and to understand how it's useful, like you need to understand some finance stuff. And that's like super important to do, because it's so empowering when you do. And when you don't, you really just resign yourself to like, hopefully somebody's watching out for me. And that's just not a good place to stand when it's deals with your financial future.
Yeah. I mean, I always thought that financial planners were for rich people when I was a kid. It's actually probably should be the opposite, but I didn't understand any of that stuff. It just seemed like, my friends who were rich, they had financial planners and then no one else did. I maybe should have correlated that in a slightly different way, which is because they had financial planners, they were able to accumulate money,
Or they lost a lot of money.
or the other. But I mean, if you find a good one, like I definitely believe that if you hire a good lawyer, a good accountant, a good financial planner, they will save you money or make you more money than they actually cost. Like those people are there to protect you and to help you. And yes, it's expensive on an hourly basis, but it should return itself back in multiples of what you're paying. And if it doesn't, then you need to find somebody else who's better at those skills.
Yeah.
But they're definitely there to help. The good ones will make you more money or save you more money than the others. So, trust the experts. I think as long as they come well recommended from other people, of course.
But also do your own research, do your own studying.
100%. It's the same thing as if you're hiring a contractor to, redo your kitchen or whatever. Like you want to make sure you're getting somebody that's reputable. But yeah, I think I internalized the idea that people hired financial planners, that only those people were rich people. It's weird now to look at that and go like, no, I should have flipped that around in my head. But that was something that I wasn't really taught or wasn't really explained to me. And it's something that we look at very differently now. So, All right. So let's head on to the lightning round now. What is your approach to allowance for your kids? Do you do allowance, or how do you explain that to them as like a thing?
Yeah, we did it for several years when they were younger. I've talked to a bunch of parents like this because it was like, it got to be such a pain because you're having to give out cash in a kind of a cashless world. And so we did those, cards where I could add, like a check off, as long as they check off their things every day, then it's on an app on your phone. But yes, they ate their bed. Yes, they did this. And then money would go to their account. And that was good for a while, except that, it costs money to have that whole process and system and app and stuff. And I was like, all right, this is not good. And we haven't really done it lately. I think we also are just like this, doing these tasks are the fee for you, like living in the house. So doing the dishes, cleaning your room, doing the bathroom, like that is, you're not going to get paid for that because that's just, we all do that. I think as my kids get older, like my daughter's getting to age where she can babysit, and they start to actually figure out how to make money. Because, kids always want to make money. They want to have money. But then you're like, okay, but that's going to require you to do this, this, and this. And then it kind of like, oh, all right. Well, slowly the concept goes away. But as my kids get old enough to like mow lawns and babysit, and they have some real money to work with, I took all that money from their savings and I put it, putting it into a bank account for them so they can actually see it. But yeah, we haven't done allowance in a while just because it got to be more work for me to maintain. Yeah. I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. What about you?
Yeah. I've done it with my son through high school, and we used, this is not an endorsement, but we used Cash App for that. And Cash App made it really, really easy for me. I could have sort of a parental account and I could view into his, but it allowed me to set up an automated allowance that would go in at whatever interval I wanted. So I did like $25 a week every Friday. And it would just pull it out of my bank account and go in there for him. It wasn't, it was a small enough amount of money that really what I was trying to do was to let him see money coming into his account and then money going out of his account. And for him to start to make a connection between what comes in and what goes out and what the consequences are of those choices and of those decisions. If it's small little things, it just helps to be able to see it. And so he would look at that balance and he could see, like, if I go out with my friends and I go get fast food somewhere, $12 comes out of my account. That's half of my weekly, budget, whatever. And so he could see really quickly. And then it turned him into a saver and an investor, which was kind of good because he looked at that number and he's like, he never wanted it to go down. And of course, it has to go down at some point, but then it can also go back up. But it created sort of a very concrete sense for him of what money was. I think for me as a kid, like I used to get $30 a month from my dad in cash as my allowance. Of course, this was the 80s and 90s, and $30 went a lot farther than it does today. But I had that cash and I could see it and I could do the exact same thing. And it did teach me that principle. It is really hard to date a girl in high school when you're 16 years old on $30 a month. I will put that out there, even in 1990.
Even in the even in the 90s.
But I made it work, and I got jobs in the summer, and I did other things in order to earn more money to be able to do that stuff. So anyway, that particular app I felt like was really helpful. I could see his spending habits. We could talk about it. It allowed that to be an open conversation. And it also allowed, with my parental permission, it allowed him to invest and buy micro shares in stocks. And then I watched that and see what that was like. And then that like sparked an entire world for him that opened up where he went, oh, I think I want to major in, business and learn to trade stocks. And so,
that's just awesome.
Yeah. I mean, so sometimes those tools can be, it didn't cost us anything extra, but sometimes those tools can be super, super helpful. I mean, obviously he lost money, trading those stocks with my permission and those types of things. And then he made money and he could see the difference, and he's learned to be sort of unemotional about it when he loses money or when he makes money. He's learned how to be level-headed about it and get that there's a long-term view and all that. So that's what we did anyway. And I'm a big fan of that app just because it made it easy for me. Yeah. So how do you handle being asked for money by like an unhoused person when you're out with your kids, sort of, in the city or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, and I haven't done this recently. In the past, we'd always keep like granola bars or something in our car, and then we did this for a little bit with like McDonald's bucks or whatever they were called. Whereas I don't like to give out cash, and usually I don't have cash.
Yeah, I don't have cash anymore.
I don't ever have cash. So I've done that in the past. But yeah, that's usually, I mean, when I see the same people all the time, I'm like, okay, this is the same person I saw yesterday and the day before. But it always brings up a good conversation. And it's especially with the kids too, we talk about like, what is this person doing? And they're older now, so those conversations have changed a lot. But yeah, that's typically how we've always done, is like give some kind of item, food, whatever. For a little bit, we had done this at their school where we did these little, what were they? They were like hygiene kits where it was like a granola bar or a comb, like a deodorant, like that kind of stuff, plus McDonald's bucks. But that's kind of how we always had done it.
Yeah, I tend to give to organizations instead of individuals. And so, I can't help every individual on the street. I don't carry cash anymore. A lot of that's for safety reasons and because of convenience and other things. So I'd rather give to an organization that I know is helping. In Durham, the Durham Rescue Mission is a wonderful organization that helps unhoused people. And so that's the way that I choose to help, as opposed to trying to help individuals on the street. And so that's how I handle that. Have you experienced helping your kids save up for a purchase? Like,
we were talking about this the other day. Like, what was your first purchase that you saved? Like, mine was a pound puppy. And I saved up all my Tooth Fairy money. So Cora is really the only one that's experienced this. Charlie, he doesn't care about money. He's not spending it. He's not asking for stuff. He's just like, I'm good. As long as I have video games. Occasionally he wants to buy a rubber ducky for his rubber ducky collection, but he's got like cash sitting in his drawer. So my daughter is much more like the spender. And so she wanted to buy these like UGG slippers that all middle school girls wear. It takes $5. I'm like, these are house shoes. These are slippers. They shouldn't be worn outside, but I choose your battles. And so she wanted to buy them, and they're like $100 slippers. And I was like, look, I'm not going to spend that much money, first of all, on slippers. And then we had bought some generic pair the year before, and I know she was fine with it, but then it bothered her. And I was like, if you want to get them, then she had a birthday coming. I was like, you can do it. I was like, I will match you up to a certain dollar amount, so I'll help you get there. And she did. She saved up and, I think she spent 75 and I gave her the rest of it, which is 25 or something. And man, she wears those every day, much to my chagrin. I'm just like, come on. These are inside shoes. But yeah, so that was kind of, and she takes care of them and she loves them. And so that was good to see, is like, she spent her own money and she's valuing this thing.
That is good. I mean, if middle school is really good for making bad fashion decisions and bad fashion choices. I think we all did it and everyone will do it. It's yeah. I mean, what a wonderful story. For me, my son really wanted to learn how to DJ and wanted a DJ controller. And so for Christmas, we bought him a relatively affordable one. And he started to learn a little bit more and he wanted to get a bigger, fancier one or whatever. And it was several $100s. And he found one that was used. And so he had just gotten some Christmas money and some other things. And he saved for several months and he worked odd jobs and he went and, pulled weeds and did things for the neighbors and stuff, all to earn money for that controller. And then I did the same thing. Once he reached a certain amount, because it was a pretty lofty expense, I kicked in sort of a little extra money to get him over the hump in the end. Yeah. I mean, he used the crap out of that thing and he learned the skill and still does it now and still uses the same controller. And I think that was the first like big purchase. I don't remember how much it was, but I want to say it was like $600 or $700 or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, he worked and saved and, he put in like $400 of his own money. And I was like, all right, yeah, that was not a cheap expense, but it's something that, taught him that skill of how to save and then to purchase. And then of course, when he got it, that was one of the first things that he ever really got where he was like, oh, this is mine and I paid for it, so I better use it. And I think that was a really good lesson too about, we don't just buy things and then not use them. If you're going to go pull weeds in the neighbors' yards in order to make money, then you got to be really committed to that thing. So that was the one for us. Yeah.
That's good.
All right. Well, I think that's all for today. We've had a pretty long, I mean, we could talk about kids, money, trauma, all that stuff, what we're passing down, what we're not. Eventually we're going to screw it up and they're going to blame us for something. And that's okay. That's why we have our savings fund for his, mental health and therapy at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. That's a separate account.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, but that's all for today. Thanks for tuning in and talking about quitting, passing down your financial trauma. So if you're new to the podcast, you can visit us at commandqpodcast.com. And you can also, check us out on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube if you'd like to see our smiling faces on YouTube. But until next time, I'm John.
And I'm Maari.
And we're reminding you that quitters can win and winners can quit. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not necessarily represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Command Q or Uncompany.